This slide is to introduce the presentation, community group models, and the Black community. This picture I feel like is a positive depiction of individuals in a community. It looks like they would support each other in this type of community. To introduce the community group models, first let's talk about the scenario. In this scenario for this assignment, we were asked to pretend that we had been hired to help lower infant mortality rates in Black communities with Black mothers. And so, one thing in my research that I noticed was that there was a very high correlation between low socioeconomic status and other concerns with cultural and health problems related to infant mortality rate in the Black communities. So a lot of the information that I have is going to kind of have that correlation between the socioeconomic statuses. I feel like a community group model that utilizes empowerment, critical consciousness, community capacity, issue selection, participation, and relevance would be ideal for lowering infant mortality rates within the Black community. I also refer to the ecological model that basically starts from the inside and works outward to help that would help Black mothers be able to decide to make a change and then be able to pursue that. Background for this topic talks a little bit about in the 1990s, IMR for Black mothers was going down, and more recently, they have noticed increase in many different states that had large populations of Black individuals, that there were increase in that infant mortality rate. Although many states did show a decrease or no change, many states did show that increase. I also found it very interesting, this is just personal observation, that the states that showed the increase for infant mortality rate within Black communities were also states that typically had high obesity rates. And I just noticed that when I was looking at the map, you can compare the map for infant mortality rates in the Black community with higher obesity rates, and there was a strong correlation I noticed, just personal observation there. The study that I got a lot of information from was done in 2016, and it noticed there were 5 main highlights of this study that I found really interesting. Individual level race and socioeconomic status were more influential than community level factors. Now, that being said, I think having community programs like the community group model that I map in the next slide can grasp those individual levels to help them rise above this issue. Maternal Black race was associated with a 1.6 greater odd of a low birth weight. And so they talk about infant mortality rate in terms of low birth weight because low birth weight is one of the main causes for the infant mortality rate. Maternal poverty was associated with 1.7 greater odds of low birth weight as well. And this part was really interesting to me, is that higher socioeconomic status Black women in white neighborhoods had the worst outcomes of low birth weight. And so if you look at that in terms of community supports, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, affluent white communities probably do not have programs that are specifically targeted at Black mothers for IMR. Those are most likely to be seen in Black communities. And so I think that's very interesting that if higher socioeconomic Black mothers move to these white communities, they're probably leaving behind those programs and they're not available to them any longer. They're also possibly don't feel the support that they felt in their Black community, so that could also be an issue. Those are just my personal observations and not things that were mentioned in the study. Higher socioeconomic status for Black women in Black neighborhoods had the best outcomes with a 4% low birth weight. And so what I'm looking at there is that they felt support in those Black neighborhoods, and that support helped them be able to have positive pregnancies, or at least that's what it appears to me in my research. This slide demonstrates a community group map, empowerment, critical consciousness, community capacity, issue selection, and then participation and relevance is on the next slide. To help empower these mothers, you need to give them the tools that they need to be able to be successful, to take care of their own lives and pregnancies. Because you can't, as individuals, they have to desire it. They can't just depend on other people to take care of them. They're the ones who are eating the food. They're the ones who are exercising. They're the ones that will take care of the child, most likely after it is born. Critical consciousness start a discussion with the community. And a lot of people will do squash discussions or have meeting places. And in my personal experience of working with the community, most people don't go to those unless it's a really hot button issue that involves taxes. Most of the time, individuals are already meeting and going places. And I feel like as health educators, we would need to bring the discussion to them. Great opportunities for that would include WIC offices, community hangouts, doctors' offices, beauty salons, possibly a community recreation center where people already are, and then you go and you talk about it there, versus having them come to you. I find that that's not as successful. Community capacity would, in these discussions, helping the mothers see what's available and also listening to figure out their needs. Issue selection is determined when the mothers can help relay, okay, this is what we think will work, this is what we think won't work, because when they feel like they're a part of it, they're more likely to pursue it. And instead of just somebody saying, okay, this is the program, this is what I want you to do, but when they feel like they had a say, I feel like there's a longer term capacity that they can participate in the program. Participation and relevance, facilitating those community discussions can help them take charge and show them the options like WIC programs, free clinics, lactation consultants, classes that are available, whatever they need to help them continue and keep going. Now we're going to switch gears to the ecological model, and this starts again with the mother's desire to have those healthy children, and I think also helping them understand the risks of not just infant mortality rate, but also helping them understand the risks of what can happen for long-term disability. The concerns there, I think, would also assist in lowering infant mortality rate, because I feel like they'd be more likely to take care of themselves if they knew not just that the babies could die, but also that the babies could have long-term debilitating illnesses that they would need to care for. So in this model, it starts with interpersonal, and then moves to organizational, community, and policy. And so the objectives of the model are to support and contribute to those aspirations of the mothers to help them grow and become better. This shows a chart demonstrating that internal to external framework. In the starting with interpersonal, we need to analyze the negative habits, cultural beliefs that could serve as roadblocks stopping mothers from pursuing the help. Interpersonal is just that support system that's going to help keep their interpersonal desires alive. Organizational is frameworks that would support those networks. Communities can help support the organizations to support the networks, the social networks. And then policy could help with funding and making sure that the government or community programs are able to last and stick around for the long term. These are specific examples for each section of the interpersonal, organizational, community, and policy sections. Cultural beliefs that I think are really interesting in many of the Black communities or communities that have low socioeconomic status, there's tend to be this idea that if you make yourself better, if you improve your life, then it's therefore rejecting the life that you had. And so I feel like a lot of perpetuation of cultural problems occurs because there's this idea that improving yourself means rejecting the way that you grew up or the neighborhood you grew up in. And growing up in poverty, I really understand this. A therapist once described this to me as crabs in a bucket. And so if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket and one crab tries to escape, all the other crabs will pull it down. And it's not because the other crabs don't want that crab to escape, but the other crabs also want to escape and grab it as a means to do that. Or the other crabs, are just trying to latch onto something and grab onto something. And so a lot of that can hold people from making positive changes in their cultural environment. You see that as a huge issue there. So interpersonal support systems can include church groups, family members, community classes, anything where they can feel a supportive environment. They can know that people will support them in their change and not reject them for their change. Organizational health clinics, prenatal care groups, group classes, prenatal yoga, these types of situations are organizations that can provide those interpersonal supports inside the framework of the church groups or the community groups. And then also in those classes, they can learn important skills about lowering infant mortality rate. Communities can provide daycare, communities can provide positive support groups. One program that comes to mind includes March of Dimes. March of Dimes will come into communities and do fundraisers and events, and that can help with, and they're big proponents of lowering infant mortality rate. And so March of Dimes would be a great program to bring into a community to help people feel energized and excited about some of these programs. Policies that could help sustain this could be policies requiring a parent educator through government or community programs to make home visits. When I was living in Rexburg, Idaho, which is in Madison County, every mother that had a child in Madison Memorial Hospital would immediately receive a informational packet as well as a parent educator so they could participate in it's called Parents as Teachers, and it's a long-term program that starts at birth and goes all the way through high school, where you have somebody that comes and visits you as a parent educator on a monthly or sometimes semi-annual, annual basis, depending on the needs level. These groups would work with people with low socioeconomic status. At the time, I was low income, and being a part of this program helped connect me with programs that were available and gain education to help me become a better parent when my firstborn was very young. And these kind of policies can help. They receive a huge grant from SAMHSA, and so working together with communities and with governments to help provide these programs can be that long-term institutional change that can support all of the other levels to work and be successful. In conclusion, the mothers in the communities that don't feel support seem to have those lower birth weight babies. And so we need to make sure that every community is supporting those Black mothers to make sure that whether they're low socioeconomic status or high socioeconomic status, that they can continue to feel that support, interact with the programs that they need, and hopefully have those decreasing infant mortality rates with the Black families. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. Here are the references to the information that I used in my slides, and that is the end of the slideshow.